Okay, welcome back to part 3 of referencing, which doesn't really deal with referencing. It more deals with the good mechanics of writing essays. I'm including this because it just seems an obvious stepping stone from referencing correctly onto being able to put together and structure an essay that makes good reading, and your referencing will undergird that and strengthen it. So let's touch on that, and decided to begin with talking about a really basic thing, and that is the area of word counts. Down the bottom over here, where my cursor's highlighting, you'll notice that we're given the number of pages and the number of words. Now, the number of words is important because many times your examiners or the people who set the work will say we want something so long, and they'll give it to you usually in words, and words are important. So you need to know how much is the word count. How long does your essay have to be? How much room have you got to play with? Alright, so be aware of that. You can always check your word count over here. It's 825 words. That includes every word in the whole project. Now, most times the things like this statement of authenticity and academic integrity, title pages, they will not be included in your word count. The word count will simply include the body of your text, including titles, and it will not include your bibliography. Okay, so that will be a word count. So if I highlight all that by left clicking and holding down that section that I spoke of, notice down here that it's only 623 words out of 825. Standard practice in academic circles is when you're given a word count, you can go plus or minus 10% on that word count. So if you're given a word count of 500, then you won't be penalized for handing in 550 words, but you will be or you could be penalized for handing in 600. So just be aware of that word count. It's important so that you can keep your essay within the confines of what's required. And bear in mind, bibliography is not included, and neither will any other formal sections of the paper, like the title page or a statement of academic integrity, or in some cases an abstract. What's an abstract? An abstract is a summary of a brief summary. It's usually only about 10% of the total word count of your entire essay. It'll tell whoever the reader is in a brief snapshot what your essay is about and what conclusions you drew and what your opinion is in a very brief summarized form. And it's there so that people who are browsing to see, checking articles or checking papers, they can easily see whether they want to read any further or not. Okay, so that's the abstract, and that will not be included in word count. Alright, now most essays will have three main parts to them. They'll have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. You may have a title which says introduction and body and conclusion. You may not have the titles that separate them. Either way, those components must be present for it to be able to make sense. And examiners, readers will instinctively look for that and see that you fulfill those requirements. An introduction should point out to the reader what it is that the paper or your essay is about, and it should let them know, give them an idea of the relevance of why it's important that you write this essay. Why should they be interested in what you're writing? Your introduction should hold that together and give them a little bit of a hint about how you're going to go about discussing the topic. So it's got a few different aspects to it. A good introduction will have all those three things. So for example, to read this introduction that I've written over here, although relatively unknown to our present-day popular culture, Thomas Midgley is credited with the development of leaded fuel, the process of extracting the very scarce bromine from seawater when it was required to prevent tetraethyl lead from fouling engine valves and spark plugs, and chlorofluorocarbon refrigerants. That's a long sentence. In her book Prometheans in the Lab, Sharon McCrone relates the impact, and so forth, so forth. So here is a little brief summary of the beginning paper. It tells you straight away that Thomas Midgley is credited with this. And were it to be improved upon, I would say that some short statement there about why this is significant would have been good in order there, if I were to be critical of this introduction, which is my own. Okay, why is this important? Should be in there as well. And in fact, if you read on a little bit further, I quote from Sharon McCrone, and she points out the significance of these impacts. So I guess I didn't do too badly after all. For example, millions of infants would have died from diarrhea, disease, vaccinations would have been ineffective without the refrigerants and so forth. So in these sort of top 2 paragraphs you see the relevance of this man's impact. Now the body of the essay comes and follows. In the body you need to develop an argument. So whatever the essay topic is, whether it's been given to you or whether it's your own, you need to develop an argument, and in that argument you need to have a point of view and opinion. Either it's someone else's that you agree with, or it's someone else's that you disagree with, or it's entirely your own opinion. You need to have that opinion and develop it. So having introduced the topic, you now need to start to expand on the different aspects of the topic, break it down into subheadings if you like, or paragraphs, and amplify it. And that would be the body. Now in this case I'm actually pointing out that Thomas Midgley sounds like the best thing since sliced bread with all his efforts, but there's been a problem here, and some of his designs, or the 3 designs that we've spoken about, have created enormous problems for humanity for many years. So I'm actually critical of Thomas Midgley, and I'm using several references, 2 mainly, especially an author called Bill Bryson, to bring up information to show that Thomas Midgley was not very capable as an effective inventor. So that's my thesis, or my main point. Thomas Midgley is failed as an inventor, and I'm going to develop that now, and I develop it through this paragraph that I'm highlighting here, beginning with, however, not everyone views Midgley's efforts in the same light as McGrain, the previous author, and I go on to talk about why that's the case. Now moving on, just to talk to you a little bit about the end of the essay. This is only a brief essay. The end has to come to a stage where there's a conclusion, and the conclusion, you must summarize your argument so that the reader is left with a concept of this is what you're trying to say. They must be convinced by you because of your arguments that you've put forward in the body of the essay, and they must be convinced that it's important, and you must change them, you must persuade them. So in order to do that, your conclusion at the end must finish with a reason, an emotional, and a resounding, convincing argument. And I try to do that at the end. And when I say the machine, I describe almost an analogy of Midgley's life, where he died in very strange circumstances, strangled amongst the ropes of a machine that he developed himself. And I use this as a metaphor to describe his lack of foresight in developing his previous inventions that have been cited as significant. So I'll leave that image in someone's mind in an attempt to try and say this is the reason why he was not successful as an inventor. And if it's convincing or not, well, you'll be the judge if you ever read this little short essay. So it's interesting, I believe, or I'm trying to make it interesting because of the strange and unusual things and the twist in the story. It seems that the man is a fantastic inventor, but when we look more closely, years down the track, the success of his inventions doesn't seem to correspond with the initial reaction. Over the years, chlorofluorocarbon, CFCs, have contributed to ozone layer depletion, and as a result global warming and rises in taxes and ecological disaster, which we're still paying for today. So I use this to make a general point that inventors need to think ahead for the future, and Midgley didn't do that. So that's the conclusion. And in a good essay, you'll be left thinking, hey, yeah, that's right. I can see the point, and you'll be convinced. All right. Now, part of the essay that needs to operate is to break your thoughts down into little bite-sized chunks. People can't eat a whole meal in one bite. They need to chew it a bit at a time, and it needs to be digestible. And in order to do that, you need to think about paragraphing. It's so important to break up your text into bite-sized paragraphs. When you break up your text in these bite-sized paragraphs, each paragraph, the first sentence should tell the person who's reading what the rest of the paragraph's about. And they're called topic sentences. They tell you the topic that will be expanded in the next sentence. For example, however, not everyone views Midgley's efforts in the same light as McGrain. So straight away the reader is told that what follows will be an amplification of why not everybody sees that Midgley was a great inventor. And that's in fact what happens. The next paragraph, Midgley went on to tackle the problem of the toxic nature of gas used in refrigerators during the 1920s. And there's an expansion. So each different a topic sentence, really you should be able to hop from topic sentence to topic sentence and actually understand exactly what the entire essay is about. And that will be a good form, a structured form of writing. It helps the person. Remember, you've got to hold the reader's attention and you've got to convince them of your point. It has to follow logically and it has to be interesting. So your sentences, your choice of words, someone wants to know your opinion, your take on it. And they need to hear your style, your view of what's happening. So personalize it with your choice of adjectives and sentence structures and information that you include. And of course, always include correct referencing, which we've covered in earlier tutorials. Well, good luck with your essay writing, and may you persuade your readers. Thank you for listening.